the collapse of a number of ice shelves and also an accelerating mass loss. So we have here the South Shetland Island, and here is the biggest island of this archipelago. Is called King George. We have here the Admiralty Bay and 3 inlets. The second one is where I've sampled where I've done the study, and we sampled 11 stations that are distributed here in this graphic. So with a bumping graph, we could sample the macroventos at different depths. We can see here an approximation of it. We here have some deep stations like number 2 and number 9, and here we have some shallower stations like number 8 and number 11. So this is just to see the bathymetric profile. So we had to identify the organisms, first using the systematic approach, just to put them a name. But then I tried to use one approach that ecologists think that is more representative and more predictive, and this is the functional approach. Because according to theoretical ecology, we can plot in a multi-dimensional space some of the organisms' preferences. And I've used here some trophic functions and some distribution functions. In the trophic functions, we have I've assignated the feeding mode, like some examples: deposit feeders, detritus, and some mixed assemblages like predator, scavenger, or filter feeders. And then also another related to trophic function is the food source. Where do the organisms obtain their food? It could be surface, subsurface, and also the food type. And pointing to the distribution functions, I've used how much can the organism move and the habitat that it prefers to be. So it's like this functional approach has more optics or more lenses, more channels to see an organism, and so we can also elucidate better what's the function of the organism in their ecosystem. From the first approach, we find out that the pattern of the alpha diversity index comes from less diverse stations here in the inner part of the inlet, and higher levels of diversity here in the outer part of the inlet. Also, these stations group very similar, following the same gradient from inner to outer part of the fjord. And the same pattern we could see when we used the functional grouping approach, but I have to point out that here the similarity was higher than the previous approach, so this is a better result. And also we saw the same pattern, right, from the inner to the outer part of the fjord. There was a crescendo functional diversity. But this grouping here in the right graphic probably might be obeying to the current patterns, because here in this glacial marine fjord, it comes from the station 11. The ocean currents come from here, take a little circle here in the station close to the glacier, and finally comes out from the through the station 9. So this grouping is responding to a current pattern. Here I have to highlight that in the alpha diversity approach, I mean the systematic approach, we saw high diversity in the station number 9, and through the functional approach we saw that the highest diversity here in station number 11. So 9 and 11 are really important and curious stations. We are going to figure out why. Here we have the channels I was talking about, and deposit feeders were the most abundant. Also, omnivory was the predominant food type. And here we see many bars, but I want to highlight that in the stations that where deposit feeders were not abundant, and thus the stations that were more distant from the glacier, there was a turnover of functions where predators and scavengers took that dominant, and we can see here in this large bar on the station number 4. Also, looking to the food source, most of the organisms were obtaining their food from the surface, and also there were the majority of them were free-living and motile species or organisms. Now we start asking a very important question, and is why? Why do we see those patterns, those distributions? And so we ran a PCA analysis, a principal components analysis, taking the temperature, O2, speed, depth, and salinity as environmental variables. And we saw something really interesting. Here, the principal component 1 explained 50% of the variation, and the principal component 2 explained 21% of it. And the station number 11, remember that was the more functional diverse, is really influenced by the current speed. And I've told you before that the currents, the ocean currents, get into the inlet through this station. So this might be shaping the community assemblages. And we